Hello and welcome to the Evercade Retreat. Gene Joke here, and today I'm adding Nyghtmare, the Ninth King, to my ever-growing list where I rank every Evercade game ever. Yep, this is another one of the vaguely Halloween type things I'm doing for this October. Nyghtmare, the Ninth King is a Castlevania style platform adventure game for the Game Boy Color and can be found on the Indie Heroes Collection 4. In it you take the role of Erin or Blizz, two heroes who make their way through the spooky adventure and well, there's a plot but I can't remember it, but in true Castlevania style fashion you work your way through the levels, taking out candle emplacements for items, killing enemies and fighting the occasional boss. Now with this game being an Indie Heroes game and being by what I presume is a fairly inexperienced developer, well, I'm bearing that in mind for this review, although its placement on the list will be against all the other games, indie, professional or whatever, and where I'm going to be quite harsh on it in places, I still think it's a good effort for an indie developer and for something that's made in GB Studio. So let's start off with the visuals, and this is probably the strongest aspect of the game. It does have a very Castlevania look, and although how much you like the outline design they've used on the characters, well, I suppose that's personal preference, but I've soon got used to it, and I think it's probably necessary so the characters stood out against the quite dark backgrounds. So for the most part I'd say the graphics are pretty good, and probably the strongest element of the game. The music is very much a mixed bag. There are a couple of tracks that are quite good and I suppose do harken back to this sort of Castlevania style sound. However, a couple of tracks are just plain awful, among the worst music on any Evercade game, except for maybe the title music on Red Gravity, but yeah, it is spectacularly bad in places. As I mentioned, some of the tracks are just absolutely fine. So on the gameplay front, well, it's a mixed bag. Now, the negative straight off the bat, the controls aren't the tightest and most responsive, something that's not uncommon with GB Studio games, but this is heightened by the button layout, which is faithful to the Game Boy Color, as that only had two main buttons and a start and select. The problem is some of the controls that are on things like the select button you need to use much more easily and fluidly than you can on an Evercade controller, or probably you really could on the Game Boy Color itself. So I strongly recommend remapping the controls. You'll find the game much more enjoyable as a result. There are two different characters to play as, and there are some differences. You even fight different bosses in certain places as a result, which gives the game a bit of longevity. All in all, for a homebrew Castlevania clone made for the Game Boy Color, I think it's pretty impressive. But taken as a whole and removing that context, it's not a great game. There are flaws here and there. Like I said, the controls aren't all that responsive. Some of the music is just a crime against humanity. And although it is quite good in places, and I say the graphics are generally pretty decent, nothing about it really shines. I've played through it with both characters, and I enjoyed it enough to do that, although with the second playthrough did feel like a bit of a chore. And really, I've got to admit, this review is probably sounding more positive towards the game than I actually feel. It is very flawed in places. I certainly didn't love it. It was playable, it was okay. And also the game as a whole was better than my first impressions would indicate. At first I thought it was kind of okay, played a bit more and thought, oh god, this game is awful, and came back around eventually. And I say, it's okay. And in some ways I feel like that's being a little bit generous. I know many people think this is an absolutely god-awful terrible game and one of the worst that's been on the Indie Heroes, and I think that's a little bit unfair. It's fine if you keep your expectations in check. So to place on my ever-growing list where I rank every Evercade game ever, I'd put it above Cannon Bomber Arcade, Subterranea for the C64. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.